The Empire. Probably my favorite campaign in Total War Warhammer, and probably the one most new players should start with. It is rather punishing, desperate, dark, and bleak, but that is what this universe is all about. The Empire is just a bunch of lads trying to survive in a world that constantly wants to kill them. They are one of the main protagonists of the universe, with their faults, I suppose you could say. They do have a cool political system as you're playing with one of the people actually in the Empire, or they have kind of a cool mini Dungeons and Dragons type campaign if you play Marcus Wolfhart out in the jungles trying to find his party members. Overall, it's a good campaign. It's very fun. A lot of unique units and a lot of unique play styles. You can really do whatever you want. You can spam infantry. You can get some crazy war machines, including a tank. You could spam cannons, you could spam archers, you can get heavy cavalry. The Empire has a little bit of everything except for monsters. The Empire of Men is a solid choice. Playing the Empire online, their infantry is trash in most cases. They do have a selection of unbreakable infantry in the Flagellants, and those can be useful in several matchups for annoying low leadership factions or just keeping your front line safe for untold eons. Other than that, their infantry is mostly blockers, not really killers. Their ranged priority also isn't exceptionally good. It's okay. Handgunners and huntsmen have their niches, but they are weak, tiny, frail things with low armor and relatively low leadership, so it's an easy backline to compromise. Empire's strength comes from their cavalry. They do have really good Empire Knights, Reiksguard, Knights of Blazing Sun. They have 3 different options that all do a different thing. Reiksguard bump and grind, Empire Knights are cheap, chipper blockers, and Knights of Blazing Sun are excellent charge pieces. They also have some armored some monstrous cav and Demigryph Knights that can cause fear and do some good armor piercing. They also have pretty good kite tools. Pretty good. Pistoliers are very cheap and very cost effective for 500 gold, but they won't win a lot of skirmish fights versus other skirmish cav. Outriders grenade launchers, armor piercing, single target shooting chads? Giga chads. The Mortar War Wagon usually sucks. The Black Lion also usually sucks, but basic War Wagons can get you some good stuff done. If you want to skirmish but you don't want to risk dogs or something running you down, these armored wagons will do you good over time. The Empire also has pretty good artillery options as far as artillery options go. Single entity sniping in the Luminarch of Hitch, or steam tank, or cannons, and Hellblaster volley guns and mortars and Hellstorm rocket batteries can take out multiple entities quite easily. Empire Lords are also a good diverse mix of mages, snipers, tanks, and duelists. The Empire has a lot of everything. You're kind of noticing that about them. Their strength, besides their cavalry, which is cost effective but isn't going to carry the game, their strength is that the Empire can kind of do anything fine. They're not going to do anything great, but they can do everything fine. Their hero roster is generally considered to be pretty bad, but they do have access to a ridiculous amount of magical lores. A lot of different ways you can play as the Empire. If you're playing as the Empire, there's not really a catch-all build, unfortunately. There's not something like the Beastmen where I can tell you your light cavalry and monsters are pretty good and your infantry sucks. The Empire's really matchup dependent. You kind of need to know what your enemy is going to do and counter that. Now, I don't mean you have to know their exact build, but it's like there's a different way to play the Empire versus Beastmen. There's a different way to play the Empire versus Wood Elves. It's hard to have a one build fits all. So, learn your matchups, grind it out, practice, and watch these guides to learn what your enemy's weak to, because the Empire probably has a little bit of that you could throw at them. As for what the Empire's weak to, that's also complicated for the exact same reason. They're very flexible. Fighting the Empire, you're going to need cheap infantry clearing tools almost any time. If they bring basic infantry, if they bring missile infantry, they'll be good. So Burning Head is still quite effective even after the nerfs against them. Pendulum is fine. Any line spell, honestly, will do really well for you against the Empire. The Empire also does not have large single entities of any kind. So if you bring one, you'll be rather uncontested in that field. You can push through their lines. Just be careful of enemy cavalry. Yeah, but you're going to have to clear out a lot of state troops. So, bring plenty of killing potential.